Good evening, everyone. I am Lady Ruby. Today's a good day. A jury stood witness to what Rudy Giuliani did to me and my daughter and held him accountable, and for that I'm thankful. Today is not the end of the road. We still have work to do. Rudy Giuliani was not the only one who spread lies about us, and others must be held accountable too. But that is tomorrow's work.
This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. The jury sent 148 million messages to Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and MAGA today in the District of Columbia about the power of the jury system in America and its abilities to do things that even the criminal justice system, sometimes because of its restrictions under constitutional concepts, is unable to do. Well, if it's unable to do it, then its closely related cousin of justice, the civil system, will step in and do what it can. And here it's helping to return a measure of dignity, a measure of life back to two women who had their life turned upside down and inside out by Rudy Giuliani, who sicked the MAGA mob on them by calling them participants in voter fraud when all they were doing was their lowly paid civic duty of counting ballots in Fulton County, Georgia. But it's not over. And the purpose of this hot take is to do two things. One, let's talk about how do they collect the $148 million? There's going to be the appeal. What happens to the $148 million judgment during the appeal? What could this mean for Donald Trump, not only in a possible lawsuit that they could bring, and I'm going to talk about the limitations on that, but also he's facing a second defamation case in front of a New York federal jury in just about a month. And look, you can screen the jury all you want, but you're going to get some people on that jury up in New York that are going to know about the $148 million down in D.C., and let's see what happens there. So this messaging that's been sent by the jury, at least one jury in the District of Columbia, is going to resound through all of the MAGA civil cases and prosecutions that we're following here on Legal AF. And the second question is, how do they collect that money, and who else could be sued for justice by Ruby Freeman and Shaye? This case now providing the template, the blueprint of how to do that. Take the first one first. The first one first is you have a post-judgment collection process under the law. And then I'm going to compare that to the appeal process. Under the post-judgment collection process, these two plaintiffs who now have a judgment in their favor can collect on it. They use what's called post-judgment discovery and aid of execution. You execute a judgment by finding assets and first liening them and then taking those assets, right? Levying on those assets, taking tangible property and cash and jewelry and real estate and boats and planes and clothes and everything else. And the way you do that first is you make that person who's lost, who's now the judgment debtor. That's what Giuliani is today as of early this afternoon, a judgment debtor with a $148 million judgment against him that will get recorded against his personal assets. Good luck getting a credit card. And then from there, you make the judgment debtor sit for a discovery deposition where you ask him questions under oath that he's required to give about his assets, how much he makes on the podcast, where his dollars are, how much he makes in consulting, how much he makes on the internet or in YouTube, and so on. More about his real estate, New York apartment, Florida condominium. Does he have any other money? Trusts, 401ks, retirement plans. And in advance, the judgment debtor fills out a form, a questionnaire, where he has to accurately list all of that, including bank accounts, give copies of bank statements, bank account numbers, 401ks, financial services accounts, stock market accounts, whatever they are. Now, some might be saying, well, Rudy Giuliani, Popok, breached about 6 different court orders in the case. That's one of the reasons he lost. Why do we think he's going to willingly participate here? And I don't. But the judge has more power to find that kind of person in contempt and eventually put that kind of person like Rudy Giuliani, who's not playing by the rules and coloring outside the lines, into jail. So he can end up in the equivalent of debtor prison if he doesn't give the information that's required. In the meantime, they can find, independent of him, using private investigators and online search engines, they can find a lot of his property. His apartment on the Upper East Side of New York, everybody knows about it. It's in every paper. You can Google it while you're listening to me. His condo near Mar-a-Lago, same thing. That's about $8 or $10 million worth of property right there. He has income from his stupid podcast. Sorry, but it is. But he makes money from it. There's MAGA followers, the way our audience follows us, that give him money, Patreon money or whatever he's collecting. They have the right to garnish those wages and go after it. The sheriff can go and levy on bank accounts wherever he can find it. And if he tries to move money in the interim, or he has moved money, let's say in the last couple of years, that's called a fraudulent transfer. And you can go to court and get that money clawed back and the debtor penalized. So that's the basics of garnishing wages, levying on property, finding bank accounts, some with the participation, unwilling or otherwise, of the judgment debtor, some with sleuthing and investigators, which the law firms that have the judgment have a big incentive to go find that money because they got a $148 million judgment. Now that leads us to bankruptcy. Why doesn't he go bankrupt? There are certain types of bankruptcy or debts that a debtor has that are not dischargeable, can't be erased and washed out in bankruptcy. And intentional torts like the intentional infliction of emotional distress and the defamation claim are not generally able to be discharged in bankruptcy. So you can try to file bankruptcy, but those claims come off the board and you're probably not able to file for bankruptcy, or at least those won't be bankrupted out. And I won't get too more complex, but there's a proceeding that you could do within the bankruptcy court process and rules to litigate on those issues while the bankrupt is filing bankruptcy. So ultimately, that's not going to work. That was a route Alex Jones tried and failed to hide and shift money, and Rudy's not that smart. Say a lot about Alex Jones. He knows how to hide his money. So that's bankruptcy, so we shouldn't be concerned about that. What about the appeal, Popok? Get to the appeal. Okay, let's do it. So on the appeal, your judgment is still enforceable and able to be executed during the pendency of your appeal to try to get it reversed. By the way, the chances of Rudy Giuliani reversing the judge's decisions that he should be sanctioned with a default judgment and a finding by her on summary judgment that he had committed this intentional infliction and defamation, the chances of him reversing that are very small. The jury amount is going to have to be decided, I think, ultimately by a jury. I like the number. Who doesn't like $150 million or so going to Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss? I mean, sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. But there's always this balance that has to be done between the amount of the consequential damages versus the amount of the punitive damages. Now here it's not too bad because they awarded $37 million apiece in consequential actual damages for the two counts, and then they sort of doubled that to get to the punitives, and doubling is about right for punitive damages under the law, so that may actually survive. I think the compensatory damages are going to have to be assessed on appeal, but at least in terms of the formula, the jury did the right thing. Obviously, the jury had a formula in their mind. And the numbers on their verdict form, we'll put the verdict form up now, $16,171 for Ruby Freeman for defamation, $16,998,000 for Shaye Moss. These are very particular numbers. And so they had to use something. I don't know if it was their estimate of how much Rudy Giuliani made or it was we'll find out. They'll eventually be interviewed. We'll find out exactly, and we'll do another hot take on it. So now you've got the appeal. In order to stop the judgment, as I started to say, you've got to post a bond. You can't just say, I think I'm going to win. I'm not paying the money until I'm forced to do it. You have to put up a bond. You're in the judgment debtor position, the losing end of this. So you don't just get the benefit of thumb in your nose. So those sheriff levies and garnishments and bank accounts and give me your Rolex and all of that, that continues unless there's a stay in place. bankruptcy stay, and I gave you the reasons I don't think that's happening, and now a stay that you get from a court of appeals. But you got to post a bond. And there's a hearing about the amount of the bond. And at $148 million, this bond can't be de minimis, can't be small. It's got to be several $1 million. If he has the $148 million or can get it from one of his MAGA followers, even though I think that's a pretty tough nut to crack, even for MAGA, $148 million. I mean, hey, what's $148 million between friends? Even Donald Trump's not giving him that. But let's say it's a 10% of that. That's still almost $15 million, which Rudy Giuliani doesn't appear to have. So they're going to have to set an amount. And that's the amount. And it's not with reference to what he really has in the bank account, although that is a consideration. They're not going to go, oh, you only have, $49 in your checking account. Okay, $48 for the bond. Not happening. The judge will evaluate all of these issues and the assets. He's got to come clean with his assets. But otherwise, she's not going to set the bond. The judge is not going to set the bond. And that's his problem. This judge is not going to bend over backwards to curry any favor with him or cut him any slack. So, and we've seen what he's done. So the chances of him properly evaluating this and participating are nil. But let's say the judge sets a dollar amount, $20 million. He's got to come up with the $20 million. I mean, if he doesn't have credit, if he has credit, he can post what's called a 10% bond, come up with $2 million. Maybe he could raise $2 million, and the other $18 million, he's got to pledge assets like the condos in Florida and the apartment in New York and whatever else he's scraped together. So maybe he comes up with $20 million. If he posts the bond sits against the judgment. And if he loses on appeal, they get the bond, right? They get the bond, especially if he doesn't pay. If he doesn't post the bond, even though the judge has set the number, then nothing happens to the judgment. The judgment is executable as of this afternoon, as soon as it's recorded, and they can go and try to grab his Rolex off his arm while he's having dinner in a restaurant, or go get his bank accounts out and the rest of it. They will make his life even more miserable than he thinks it is right now. So for me, the prediction is as follows about the $148 million. One, he's not going to scrape up enough money for the bond, or it's going to be a bond that he's going to have to give up a kidney for in order to stop it. And then it'll be a very substantial bond in favor of Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss that they can at least say, well, we're going to get at least this amount of money, God forbid, if anything else, as Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss and their lawyers and their investigators go find his real estate, his boats, his planes, his 401k, his pension. He gets a pension as a former federal officer. They can try to forfeit his pension. There's a whole bunch of things that can happen here to collect money. They might be able to even collect up to maybe $100 million if you scrape all this crap together. And or Rudy Giuliani, for the rest of his natural born days when he's working, is going to be cutting over 50% of that money over to Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss. That's what's going to happen. On my next hot take, because I don't want to stretch it out too far here, my next hot take I'm going to talk about, can they go after other defendants for defamation? And the answer to that is yes and no. I'm going to do that in my next hot take. But until my next hot take, follow me on Legal AF, the leading podcast at the intersection of law and politics and justice. I co-founded it. It's on Wednesdays and Saturdays right here on the MeidasTouch network. You can free subscribe and help them get to 2 million free subscribers before 2024. That would be, what a gift that would be. And then keep me on the air. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a note. That helps with the ratings and all of that. And then you can pick up our audio podcast of Legal AF on all the audio podcast platforms of your choice. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Thanks so much for watching. We're only a few subscribers short of 2 million subs. Please subscribe right now to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel for free and help us grow this unapologetically pro-democracy network.